Meet Heidi Rew, actress, voiceover artist, and co-founder of the Atlanta Voiceover Studio.
Starting in television and radio, Heidi eventually shifted her focus to the world of voiceover, and in doing so, provided a space for others in her industry to grow and thrive.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Jo Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go. So, welcome to the show, Miss Heidi Rew.
Woo!
So you may or may not have been briefed, but we do a thing at the top of the show, the 60-second intro. Billy's going to put you on the clock. She's going to cue you, and you're going to tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay.
Think of the elevator like your elevator pitching yourself.
Okay.
And after that, we deep dive.
Okay. Great.
All right, and go.
Okay, I'm Heidi Rew. I am a voice talent and on-camera actor, and then I co-own Atlanta Voiceover Studio. I had a career in radio before, a brief stint on TV where I hosted a weird home shopping show. And and I work with my husband. We own the studio together, and I love to create, I love to bake, I love to work out, and I'm really passionate about small business and encouraging others.
Wow. You had 32 seconds left. That's great.
That was like a nice tight radio ad.
Yeah.
I know. We had to do stuff in like 10 seconds or less. So I'm used to trying to get it all in short time.
Didn't stumble, nothing, just flawless.
Yeah, we had this theory that people can feel it, especially if you've done radio or voiceover, you start to feel what 30's
the
like.
Time. Oh, 100%. 100%. If somebody says shave a second off, I'm like, oh, I know what that second, I know what it feels like,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Especially if you're like TV or radio where it's like back more in the day. Well, I mean, it's still out there, but when it was primarily what was it? What do they call it? My brain's, I can't brain today. I have the dumb. So was it like you had like appointment TV or radio, you had to be there. So everything is very, very time specific.
Mm-hmm.
So, you get really good. I got back when I was in the middle of working in TV, or I could be watching a TV show, get up, go do whatever, and then come back just in time.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
For the TV. Got right. I could time out the breaks.
Oh,
so
it's
well.
so sad. We don't have to use that skill anymore.
No.
We just push pause.
So I want to start off with you said you started. Did you start in radio? What was your career journey?
Yeah. No, I didn't start in radio. I actually was I went to college to try and go into television broadcasting. I wanted to be a reporter. And so I interned, and I went to DC too for this big conference. And when I interned, I got really good taste of what it would be like. And I just realized, I will be really bad about this because I will not get the story. I will want to go and hug that woman that, just lost somebody that she loved or whatever. And I just knew that I wouldn't be good at that job. And so then I was like, oh, shoot, well, now what do I do? And I interned at a radio station, and I loved that. And so I thought, this is great. This is what I can do. But then out of college, I couldn't get a job in a radio station. And so I went to a casting call for this small cable show that's kind of a home shopping show type thing. And I booked the gig. And so I did that for only about a year. And then the radio station that I had interned for in Chattanooga called me and said they wanted me to do evenings and do some everybody in small radio stations, they do multiple jobs. So I also did a promotional marketing type job too with them.
So you ended up in radio after the on-camera thing. And during that, were you doing anything else, or was that mainly it?
It was my full-time job. Yeah. For on camera, I was there full-time. I did a show. It was actually really, it was one of those things where when I told people, they'd be like, oh, wow. And I'm like, no. This is more you got to start somewhere type of job. It's not all glamorous or anything. Nobody's doing my makeup or hair. I did it myself. And it covered probably 9 counties. So it wasn't anything Huge. But I had to do a daily show that was 2 hours unscripted. And so it really gave me some great tools in that, just even in that year of like being able to improv, and then I would go in and interview some different companies that advertised for the station, so that helped with some interview skills. And so it really did give me some really good on the job training, but I was glad to go into radio after that.
And so a lot of our guests, the thing is, I don't know, most people come out of college and they go right into a job where they answer to a boss, and, someone gives you your assignments and you do the assignments, and, you either get a thumbs up or they're like, performance review, right? So how did you transition into doing what you do now? And what do you think the differences are now? I feel like I'm jumping ahead, but, if you could kind of describe, like, how do you feel different, or what is different in being your own boss and running your own business and that sort of thing?
I think it's such a great question, Billy Joe, because just because you asked that, I realized that some of the first initial jobs actually really gave me some of that training in a way that I didn't even realize until now. Because I have always been kind of a self-starter. I've always been interested in being an entrepreneur. And but when I started at the radio station, they basically made me head of this one kind of promotions arm of the station. But there was no roadmap. That was a new position. I had no idea how to do this. And I just thought, well, this is my objective. I'll try and figure out how to bring in the results. And I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'll just go for it and try it. So that was like my first initial toe dipping into that. But then when I left radio, after that job, I went into something else where I didn't have to do as many other things. It was mainly on air and helping with some content and stuff. And after that was, I think that the biggest thing was like, oh, wow, there's not a marketing department. There's no sales. If my computer breaks, I can't call IT, like that was a huge wake up call. And I'd already been kind of doing a little bit of stuff I had already been doing voiceover on the side and on camera stuff on the side while I was in radio. So I already knew a little bit of it. And then I had a blog. So I was already doing a lot of stuff on top of radio. But yeah, when you get out there, you realize, wow, I'm a one woman show here, and I got to do all this stuff. And it's not easy, and it can be very overwhelming.
And how did you, I guess let's start with, when you guys started Atlanta Voiceover Studio, like what was the instigator, and what was that transition like?
So for Atlanta Voiceover Studio, we never intended it to be what it is today. It was mainly that Mike and I were doing stuff, we had a home studio, and I really miss people. I love being around people. And I was mentioning that to him. And we had, at the same time, one of our friends who had done on-camera stuff, and he's also a producer and, had his own agency. He had just bought this building that he was going to open up to be a soundstage studio where he was going to rent out to productions. And then within that space, there were a bunch of offices that he was going to rent out. And so Mike said, well, why don't we just rent out a little bit of that space? We can create an outside studio. That way you'll get out of the house. And then our friends that do on-camera work, at that time, they would get, a voiceover audition once every few months or so. So every time they did, they'd have to like lug out their stuff, try and do an audition either in their closet or wherever. And it was just such a hassle for them. And so I thought this way, they're not going to miss out on these opportunities. And then hopefully we can offer enough to where it at least just covers our rent. I never thought that this would be a profit-making business. I just thought, oh, this will be great. We can do an outside studio. It'll cover basic stuff, and then, we can go from there. But then when we started it was a 100 square foot space that we rented, and Mike named it Atlanta Voiceover Studio. And so then people started calling us and going, hey, I've got this this talent that is an actor that is in town filming something, and we've got to record them. Could you, do a session with us? And I'm like, sure. And Mike's like, no, we're not engineers, Heidi. We're just voice. I'm like, well, I know, but like, how hard? Like, we do it for ourselves. Like, what's the big deal, And then people did come to record their voiceover auditions, and they thought, man, this is great. I really want to learn more about voiceover. I'm doing these auditions. I don't feel like I have the tools to really do well at these auditions and to be able to make this part of my diversification of income, as an actor. And I wish that there were classes and more resources. And we thought, well, we don't do that. I'm sorry. Maybe there's somewhere else in Atlanta. At that time, there was another Atlanta studio that had just closed. And we knew of some other some other talent that literally had opened up, that were part of the Atlanta voiceover community, that had opened up another studio almost at the exact same time we had. And we went to this meetup or whatever with our community, and they said, hey, we're opening up a studio. We're like, no way, we are too. But they were doing more training. And so we really started pushing people more towards them. But they were up in Norcross, so it was a different location. And they just kind of had a different focus than what we did or do. And so at that point, this is a long story. Wow. But at that point, right around that same time, a good friend of ours who's in the voiceover community, Brian Bremer, had reached out to us and said, I'm already doing this intro workshop with somebody else, but I would love to do it with you guys. And we're like, well, people have been asking, so okay, sure, I don't want to teach, so why don't you do it? And he did it, and it was such a huge success. And then people asked for more classes and more training, and we ended up not being forced to do it, but we're just like, there's so much need and we want to help people. It really came from, we would hear these needs and we're like, gosh, yeah, we wish that we had a better roadmap when we started out. And so we would love to provide that for you guys and for this community. And so then it just grew from there.
So how many years was it from when you first opened that first space to now?
So it'll be 8 years this summer. And it literally, we opened it up in June of, 2016. And then we were already offering the intro workshops. We had started like opening it up for business, like I think towards the end of July. And then by January, I think was the first intro workshop. And then it just kind of kept going from there. So
sounds like a field of dreams situation. If you build it, they will come.
Right.
That's amazing to me that it's only been 8 years, because I know, like, my boyfriend, when I first came down here, I think I mentioned something, this was like 6 years ago maybe, that I first came down here for VOA. And
wow.
And I was just like, what if I have a session or something?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do? And he's like, oh, call Mike. And I was like, okay. I don't know who that is, but okay. And so I had heard Mike's name before, before I even really got very far in then voiceover. But yeah, and then we didn't mention it up at the top, but I met you because my boyfriend said to talk to Mike, and then when I moved here, I want to get into a class right away and got into Steve Henderson. My brain just went Hendrickson, but no, Hendrickson was my acting coach from up north who also does voiceover. Steve Henderson's class, and then you introduced me to Brandon. So it's all
full circle, which I love. I think that's so great.
Heidi is indirectly responsible for this podcast.
That's very, 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 very interesting.
But it is true.
Like a godmother.
It is true.
you guys have done all the creative work and all the wonderful things behind it. So
I know, but like you're modest. You, like me, we're both people connectors. We both are
yeah.
like, ooh, what if? Like, ooh, I
Yes,
could
you should meet
introduce.
this person. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, like I
Yeah.
get
I
so
like to use the
excited
term
by that.
facilitator.
What?
Yeah.
I like to use the term facilitator because like we even have like that's a thing like on our website, like like
Hmm.
actors, writers, artists, musicians, poet. But I have one that's just like facilitators because we know a lot of people who, even if you aren't always actively doing the thing like acting or writing, but they're always like connecting people who do those things.
Mhm.
So you're therefore always kind of giving back to the community, or you're kind of, it's like a producer would, like you're putting the talent together and kind of, seeing what happen, what'll happen, like a mad scientist just pouring stuff into the vial, seeing what
Uh,
kind of reaction you're going to get.
Well, I think
yeah.
like I mean I don't know. I see this with Heidi too, like through all the stuff you do, but that just desire to create and like not just create
Mhm.
your own thing, but you're like, oh, I know this person and this person had this oh, gotta,
Yes.
connect these threads together.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, with all that you do in that realm, with
Mhm.
so much of that, like, has that come back around to create opportunities for you? Like, I'm
Yeah.
just curious how that works.
I don't even think I've ever thought of it like that.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that the hope would be that eventually, like, the more you give to people, the more eventually it comes back. But I also just have this philosophy of just, I always want to try and give more than I get. And sometimes that can be bad. I would not say that, just use that as your like mantra for the life, because you do need to fill up yourself because I've also hit those times where, I'm like, oh boy, this could be headed to a breakdown if I don't fill myself back up,
Hmm.
to be able to give. But I still can't get away from, I just can't not live my life like that.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I guess in a way that's the foundation for me for creating relationships. And I feel like, and if you create great relationships, people work with people that they like, they know, and they trust. And so
Hmm.
I just always want to be creating good, great relationships. And I just think if I focus on that, eventually somehow it will come back, but I don't always see it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't.
Yeah. And I guess I should pull back and sort of, I don't know how to explain that a little bit. Like, I've talked to certain friends of mine who are very hesitant to put themselves out there and market themselves in a
Hmm.
way, or, you know, don't do the social media thing, or don't network, or don't do all these things. And their thing is like, I think the problem is that they see it as transactional.
Mm.
And I guess what I said can sound a little like I think of it as transactional, and I don't think of it as transactional at
Yeah.
all.
I don't think you do either. Just from
Yeah.
how I know you. Yeah. I don't
Thank
think
you.
that at all.
Like, I just don't want anyone to take that the wrong
No.
way. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think of these things as transactional. And I think that's where people who are afraid to do these things, they have a negative view of these things because they see them as transactional. And I'm like, no, I just want to connect with people. Like, even when I was a
Right.
server, like, my thing was not to get the best tip from this person, because I know that that person
Mhm.
is, we have regulars who just never tip well. And I'm still just the same to them as everybody else. I still want them to have
Mm.
a great time. I still want them to get what they want out of it. Um, I still, I if it was transactional, I'd just be like,
Right. You'd be like, "Okay, I don't have time for you." Yeah.
right, and
Yes.
it's not, and
Yeah.
so it's interesting because there's a lot of connections with serving in this type of thing where it's like,
Yeah.
if you're an entrepreneur, you're not just trying to get the next job. You're
Mm.
trying to have a long-term relationship with these people. And yes, you want to keep working with them, but it's not about that one thing.
Mhm.
This maybe be like the difference between, I guess, business versus commerce in general. Like it's kind of like you're saying one thing, just doing like just simple transaction for transaction, right? I do this for
Mm,
you, you do this for me. But I guess in the broader sense, where it's just like we're just going to kind of go out there and create this landscape and have it where it's just like, like building like a marketplace, and just whoever wants to come in, and like whether you just passing through and visiting and just kind of getting to know people and chit chat, or you're actually doing business and making projects, and or just relationships, networking, all that. It's I think it's the difference between just, again, this is strictly transactional versus we're just going to create that space, and what happens.
yeah.
I think, like Billy was saying, people get daunted because if it's all transactional, then you feel like you owe everybody, right? Like anybody,
Hmm.
like I'm gonna owe.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's different where it's like, oh, we're just going to come together, and then it's like, well, if the right opportunity comes along, we can work together. If not, oh, it's nice to have met you, and I'll
Right.
maybe if nothing else, you just kind of get like a low key fan out there, or
Well,
someone who just like likes what you do and appreciates it.
yeah, and I think that the other thing is, the people that I talk to that have that worldview too, they're more likely to be upset if they've done something for someone and it
Hmm.
doesn't come back from that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
And I just kind of believe that, like, if you're putting it out there, it might not come back from that person, but that person might talk to somebody else and it might work
Right.
its way back around, or just in the, ether. I know, like, whether you're religious or not, like the belief that
Hmm.
like karma or
Yeah, I
something
was
comes
just
Yeah.
back
thinking
around
it's
you.
almost like karma in real time, though, right? It's just like you're literally just put, like Heidi's talking about, you're just putting stuff out in the community. It's not even like with the expectation, like, again, that transactional expectation. I'm going to do all this stuff, then suddenly everybody's going to come do for me. It's like, no, I'm just doing this because I want to do it. I like to do it. And
Hmm.
then, just laws of like people interacting, like Billy saying, this person talks to that person. Maybe that person who you interacted with immediately isn't going to do something for you. But by virtue of you kind of like, again, it's like a pay it forward situation till it somehow kind of worked its way back.
And
You
I
Hmm.
know,
think that's what I was getting at, is that when, with the question to Heidi in the first place, is that there have been times where it's like, going back to how we all met, or how,
Yeah.
we connected each other, that, I went and did something for this person as a result of that thing, which my mom thought was stupid. Um, like, I went and read for this guy's screenplay. And then because
Yeah.
of that, I met him. And then, like, he paid us with dinner. So I didn't, get paid. And I went in a blizzard and I could have gone off the road like 22 other people did that day. But, like all these things. But then 10 months later, all of a sudden he calls me out of the blue and offers me a job that leads me to my
Wow.
only long term day job that actually gets me financially stable enough that I can do what I want to
Wow.
do. So it's all these little tiny threads
Yeah.
that connect back. And I'm always fascinated by that web that's behind the scenes,
Hmm.
of the tapestry we
Yeah.
see. There's all these threads that go behind the scenes that we don't see for a long period of time.
Hmm. That's so true. And it's like planting seeds too, like you
Hmm.
don't, I mean, listen, when I was in elementary school, probably, and we had that little project where you put it in the little Dixie cup, I mean, sure, I probably looked every day to see if there was something coming up. But most farmers or, gardeners or whatever, they plant the seeds, they do the things that they need to do, and they know that, okay, eventually it's going to come and sprout. And then there's going to be some that don't sprout. And that's okay. That's just a matter of planting and doing the work and doing the things to cultivate a great garden. And so that's what I kind of feel like with relationships. I don't have expectations that something's going to come out of it, but I try and give what I can to that relationship and just know that somehow eventually, if I continue to do great work with what I do and I know the value and what I can bring to somebody else, that eventually maybe it'll come around in some way, that something will sprout somehow. So,
it reminds me of like like there's one of those movie lines that absolutely, when you hear it, it just totally emotionally floored you. There's this one line where and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly. It's from the movie. Was it the Best Exotic Marigold
Mm.
Hotel?
mm,
Like it's a bunch of like American expats, American and English expats going to live in India where it's a lot cheaper. but there's like this lady who goes and helps out this really young, like Indian guy, who's trying to build up this hotel from like nothing. He's just out there just on pure hustle, but
Mm-hmm.
she's willing to kind of give him his time and her time and attention. And this guy goes, he's talking to her about that. And he says, I greatly admire people who are willing to plant trees under whose shade they will never sit.
Mm.
Like putting that stuff out there, like you said, planting those seeds. You may, like I said, you may not get to sit under that shade, but somebody else
Mm-hmm.
will. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like that. I really admire that mentality
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like, again, like karma in the very realist sense. We had one guest who was talking about like manifesting, and that's all.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays you hear a lot about that. The whole, it's like, oh, the secret, the power of attraction, and a lot of stuff just
Yeah.
sounds very woo woo. But then there's the real side of it is just like, like what you're talking about here, like with karma, it's like you're just doing these things. You're putting good out into them. Someone is going to benefit, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's not you. And that person benefits. Maybe they take that spirit forward, or like the whole, like, they tell two friends and then they tell two
Yeah.
friends. Or this one is like they help two people and then they help two people. And then
Yeah.
eventually it can kind of filter back around to you because Atlanta is still a relatively small community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even what Joe was talking about just a little while ago about her boyfriend saying, hey, you should talk to Mike. This year is actually the first year we've ever paid anyone to do marketing. And it's just with some Google ads that we're working on, and it's mainly for provoiceovertraining.com. And it's all been through word of mouth. And so that's been great. The other part, though, is it's kind of been like, oh, shoot, how do we market well, But it has all been through just word of mouth and just other people talking about it, I guess. And
But
hopefully that we're doing a great job and then they tell other people.
but besides that, I mean, you guys do have a good marketing machine in place from what you do. Just the fact that you have your podcasts and and you may not think of those as marketing things,
Mm,
but they do a job. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like even even if that's not the primary point of them. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
You have that,
yeah,
you have the email list, you have like those. I mean, everybody talks about now how like unless you want to pay a lot for marketing, your email list is your best tool, right?
right. That's so true. And to encourage anyone too that is doing like a side hustle now on top of their job or whatever, um, I had a blog that I did on the side when I worked in radio, and that blog helped me to like figure out and learn how to do an email marketing list. And so when we first opened up Atlanta Voiceover Studio, literally that's what we did from the very start is I started an email newsletter that would just go out every week. Um and I've just kept that up and it's grown, and it's not like crazy huge numbers, but I do know that the people that do stay subscribed are like they are in it. You know what I mean? And we get so many emails back about those email newsletters. And I don't think we've hardly ever repeated any in almost 8 years. And we try and give really good, valuable information from that. But I share that story to say that if there's anybody that is doing a side hustle, and one, if you feel like, why am I even doing this? This is so much work, or I'm not seeing the fruit from it. You have no idea how the lessons from that could end up showing up in another way down the road that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I learned that then because it helped me in this endeavor.
I want to ask you about that a little bit because I I know for me when I was still doing mainly stage and on-camera acting, I started my blog at the time
Mm-hmm.
very very like dipping my toes in, like didn't blog regularly, but I put a few articles in some local, you know, acting publications,
Yeah.
and then I got tiptoed in, started blogging a bit here and there. And that was one of the big things that actually started to make me feel um like I knew something. Like
Mm.
I've talked to so many people who are like, about LinkedIn or social media in general, and just like the idea of posting about things, and they're like, I wouldn't even know what to say. I'm like, I didn't know what to say at first either, but once you start writing and start writing out your thoughts and your experiences, you're like, what would I tell myself 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Mm,
Like, what would I go back and tell my 20-year-old self about what they're doing right now that might make their life easier? And
hmm,
once you start looking at it that way and really sort of writing for yourself and your past self in a way that would help others, it's like that is useful. And it also helps you realize how far you've come
mm.
and what you know that you are, I don't want to say expert exactly, but kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
that you have more knowledge and more power than you think.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love what you said, where you said, I felt like knew something because, they always say that when you teach what you've learned, that you retain like 90% of that versus if you don't, it's like 10%, or maybe it's more, a little more than that, but not much more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's so great that, yeah, you're able to actually get a lot from it, even though you're giving a lot through blogging and sharing your story.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So
I
for,
think I heard someone was saying like one of my old writing teachers like say like writing is just a way is a way of knowing your own mind, or it's kind of like
Mm,
writing is like knowing when like art, drawing or painting is really seeing, like music is really listening,
mm,
and teaching is really just learning. Like you said, like
mm,
when you have to teach something, you have to know it that much better.
right,
Like
right,
I
right.
remember like back when I was still doing martial arts, like when I knew, I think I had an instructor was like, okay, you're going to come in here, you're going to teach for 10 minutes. But I probably prepared for like at least about 2 hours worth of outside just to
Mm,
know like, okay, this is going to be my lesson. And then of course I went in there and he's like, I gave him an assignment of 10 minutes and he did 30. So
yeah,
because you kind of you go again, you're going over it. It's kind of I don't know, this weird kind of, I don't know, that's not paradox, but like this kind of,
yeah.
or the yin and yang of it. Again, teaching is learning. So
Mm-hmm,
like you have to like, and I've always, this is a very, like they always say like, the best teachers are always the best students,
mm-hmm,
right? So,
mm-hmm.
because if you don't know it, you can't teach it.
Right, right,
so
right.
when you started your blog, Heidi, what were you trying to express and how did that help you in your,
So it came at a time when I was telling you guys that I was on air and I was doing a lot of content. So at the time I was doing a split shift. So I was doing morning radio, afternoon radio, but I was doing traffic, but I also was contributing to the shows there, especially the afternoon show. So I do a lot of the content for that and we do bits together and really, have a show. And then we had a new boss come in and he ended up getting rid of the guy that I co-hosted with in the afternoon. And he brought on another female and did not like me
mm,
at all. It was really just a sad situation. I really tried so hard. I would write her notes, I would try and, connect with her, and it just didn't work out. So at that time I really felt like all of my the creative outlet of that job was stripped away, and I was finding myself just in a bad place. I just felt I'm reporting traffic. It's like the same thing every day. And I used to try and make it really creative and interesting and helpful. And my boss said, just report the traffic, like stop
mm,
adding personality, basically.
Mm.
And that just was devastating to me. And at the time, I really, blogging, especially for like home decor and all that stuff, that was really getting off the ground. And I loved those blogs. And I've always loved like interior design and stuff. And I thought, gosh, if I had a blog, what would I do? And I also loved at that time to throw parties for people. And people would always say, oh, how do you do this? Or what are your tips and stuff? And so I thought maybe I could do a party blog.
mm,
So I named it Parties for Pennies. And I would talk about like budget friendly party ideas, basically. Um, and I did that on the side while I worked in radio for a while. And then I started getting, a few sponsors here and there. And so I really kind of wanted to use that as like a diversified stream of income after I left radio. Um, but that's a whole other thing. If you leave radio, you think, at that time, I would get people recognizing me or, even like they're checking me out and I sign my receipt and they're like, Heidi Rew? What? Are you Heidi Rew? And I'm like, yeah. um, and so you think that, and, I never did it for that, but you do think like, oh, okay, well, maybe people care about what I have to say and they'll follow me even if I'm not on the platform. And what I learned really quickly is that people follow platforms for things that they care about. So just because somebody was listening to me on the radio, but that doesn't mean it's going to translate to a blog about parties, because it has to be something that they're interested in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a huge learning lesson. And I still did it even up until when we started the studio. And I just finally had to give it up more from, I'm like, I just don't have the time. And this is kind of really ridiculous. It doesn't help my income really at all. It's kind of something that I'm holding on to, and I need to let go of it. So,
But you later started a podcast, which I really enjoyed, called The Encourage Minute. And what I enjoyed about it was the storytelling aspect of it. And it was
yeah.
really tight, really focused.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the broadcast work, the pro, stepping
Uh-huh.
up. And because I always really admired just like how, like, and you like start the clock and then you would break this little story down, and it was really efficient, really well done.
Oh,
And then it was also kind of cool because it's not just like, oh, yay, you can do it. Where it's like, oh, here's an example of somebody doing it. So if they
yeah.
can do it. And again, it was like, what was I guess I get as Billy was saying, the instigator. Was it still just that? Because like you sound like you've kind of had this creative drive even back when you were doing radio. I mean, I know
Mm.
now you've gotten into acting, which is another kind of form of it. So is it just was it that creative spark just kind of kicking in? I guess maybe after you've stopped the blog, you just like, I've just got to get something back out there. Like, what was the thing that kind of led you to starting that podcast?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that, and Billy, you guys both probably can totally relate to this. It's like when you make voiceover on camera stuff your job, it's great, but it's up to other people to hire you. And you don't have necessarily the control. I mean, you're a collaborator, but you don't have control over what you're creating. And so I wanted something that could be mine, and that I could create, and I had that control to determine what I'm putting out there. Um, and the encouragement, it really came from, I did just an interview type podcast for over 2 years, um, where I'd have like different people that I come in to interview. And I loved that. And I wish I could do more of that, continue to do more of that. And it just became a time thing with the studio and everything else. And so then I thought, well, I don't want to give up podcasting. What can I do? And I thought, well, this would be a way to do that. And I can still, the whole purpose of the podcast before was sharing people's stories of real life, like, the challenges and the hard stuff, like you guys do. You showcase people that, are in the thick of it and have been in the thick of it and have come out of it. And so I wanted to do that in a way that maybe I could save a little bit of time, doing it. And I did, but it still got to be just a point where I was like, okay, I really need some margin. Um, and there wasn't anything else that I could cut out outside of that. So,
It's a lot of work, I know.
yeah.
But I want to ask, so you had, you have these ideas, you obviously put them into action. I hear from a lot of people, where they're just like, oh, I have this idea, but they never do it. So are you just somebody who's naturally driven, or how have you, gone from the idea to creating it with,
Mhm.
have you ever felt like things have gotten in your way, or what allows you to go from the idea to creation?
Yeah. I am a doer, and I always think I'm going to do it and I'll figure it out as I go, which is good to some degree. But the problem with that mentality, for anybody else that is listening that feels that way, is the problem is throughout my time. I, well, let me demonstrate it by this story. When I left radio, at the time I was being mentored by the program director of Star 94. And he was awesome. I mean, he would spend like hours with me, which was the most generous, kind thing. And um, I think I was always hoping that he would bring me on. And when I told him I was leaving radio, he said, okay, let me give you this advice. I want you to take the next like 3 months and just take off. Don't do anything. Like, don't put anything into action, nothing. I don't want you to audition for voiceovers. I don't want you to audition for on camera stuff. I want you just to take that time. And I want you to think through stuff. And I want you to really just take time to rest and to contemplate. And I did not do that. And to this day, that is one of my biggest regrets. I jumped right in and I thought, are you kidding me? I can't stop this train. And like, I'm, finally free and I got to, just jump in and try and make things happen. And that has been my problem. And I feel like as I've gotten older, I finally realized the value in trying to take that time, not just like over months or whatever, but during the week of just sitting going, okay, how is this week going? What has worked? What hasn't? Because otherwise I'm just this hamster on a wheel and it's awful. And there are some weeks that I don't have control over that I do feel like from the moment I get up till the moment I go to bed, it is, full. And so I'm really trying to be better about that and just prioritizing that time. But yeah, I love to create and I won't stop, but I hope that I've gained a little bit of wisdom to reflect as well, because not everything works and that's okay. And that doesn't mean it's a failure. But if you continue to create, if you continue to do without thinking through, what did I learn through this process that can help me? Like there's been times where I've just made the same mistakes over and over again because I didn't stop long enough to go, wait, why didn't that work? Was there something that I could do differently the next time? And, yeah, I think that I wish that I had taken more of that time. I think I wouldn't have had to make some of those mistakes over and over again.
So I'm hearing you say that part about your boss telling you to take 3 months, and I'm like, 3 months?
Yeah.
Like, how? I mean, most people would be like, I can't afford to take 3 months. I cannot afford to, like literally. But it sounds like you're saying also you wouldn't need to actually just do nothing for 3 months. You could say, okay, I got to get my finances, I got to make sure I'm stable. But then also I can build in time to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the time I told Mike that, because at the time we were married, we had been newly married, and he was the one that encouraged me to quit the radio station in the first place. And when I told him that, he said, oh, I fully support this. You should absolutely 100%. So I did have his support even on that, and again, we weren't making a ton of money, but I think that was already when I had booked like a big national spot too. So it, I could have done it. I just chose not to. And I regret that big time.
How much time was there in between when you left the radio station and when VOA Atlanta, wrong one, Atlanta Voiceover Studio started?
I think it was about 4 or 5 years.
Okay. So you were just doing voiceover mainly during that time?
Voiceover and on camera stuff. Yeah. I was doing a lot of commercial and hosting.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, what led to the acting? Was it just, did you kind of like said, trying to take some of the skills you've done with the on-camera hosting? Because there's a degree of, there's a little bit of acting that goes into that, but how did you decide, like, I want to, now that I've kind of dipped my feet into those waters, maybe try and take it over here to another area?
I've acted since I was a kid, and I used to act. I used to even direct some stuff, and even in college, I was Cinderella for our college musical. And so I always did that stuff, but I never thought, oh, I could do this as like a career, like that I could make some money from it. I just knew I loved it. I loved doing it. And so it wasn't until when I was in radio, Mike was the one, first of all, that talked to me about voiceover. This was when we were dating. Oh, we weren't even dating. But he said, oh, do you do voiceover? I could listen to your voice all day. And I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And so he really showed me the ropes of voiceover and helped me, it just immensely. But even then, I just thought this is a side thing. Like, okay, great, cool. I can do it on the side. No big deal, And he was also doing on camera stuff. And I was like, I originally wanted to do more hosting stuff. And I would do a lot for clients for the radio station. Actually, I would host stuff on camera for them, and I would go and interview them and do all that stuff. And so I thought, I mean, I couldn't do this for other clients, right? And Mike was like, yeah, so he introduced me to Houghton Talent, which was my first on-camera agent. And they took me on right away. I will say that part of it is probably, I know I came with some skills, but being on the radio station definitely helped, I think, as well. Just people already recognized you a little bit. So they're like, okay, yeah, I know her. And so when I was in radio, I was auditioning for voiceover, but I also was auditioning for on-camera stuff for commercials and hosting. And the TV and film stuff, that wasn't really my priority. But then I started jumping into classes and I was like, gosh, this is like, this is what I loved growing up. I just didn't really think I could do it. I don't know what I was thinking.
Did
And
you find that the broadcast experience kind of helped make that a more transferable skill and like taking it to the on camera? Because like when you present something, you kind of have to be that mood or kind of like, or same thing as if you're doing like news, you kind of have to get, even if whatever's going on, you've got to match the mood of whatever piece you're doing, whether it's something kind of happy and upbeat or if something very, deadly serious, like you just kind of have to be that. And if you don't, it's going to look really, really bad.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that year of working at that small cable show really helped me because I did 2 hours, straight of a show, no script, trying to make it entertaining and interesting as much as possible. And I think that really helped me too, because it wasn't live, it was taped. But it really helped me to focus. So when it came time, especially to like teleprompter stuff or ear prompter, it feels a lot easier to me than I think other people would say that it is. It just felt very natural. So as far as the hosting stuff goes, and then the TV and film stuff, I think that one of the weird things that actually helped me from radio that's also helped with voiceover is, my first radio job in Chattanooga, he was like, you sound like you're kind of presenting, on air. And so he told me like, hey, at that time, because, cell phones weren't what it is, it's like, bring in a picture of your friend, post it up there and act like you're just talking to that one person. And then it makes sure it sounds more connected and they feel like you're actually just talking to them. And so I learned that through radio. And I think that when it came to time to TV and film, one of the things that Chase, who was at Houghton and now is like a big, huge casting director, he does Stranger Things and stuff. He would always tell me, he's like, you just are so natural and behind the camera. Like, you don't look like you're performing. You just look real. And that, I think, came from radio, of just thinking, oh, well, I'm just trying to transfer what I learned in radio to on camera and just be connected to that other person that I'm reading with.
Yeah, because I remember I had I had this, because I'm glad you mentioned the whole thing about like being natural, because I've seen a lot of people get in broadcasting. They get what I call like chronic radio voice. Like I had this teacher in college who every time you talk to him, he sounds like he was doing a radio ad. Because like he just has that kind of, oh yes, and if you'd like to do this assignment today, and or turn it into my, just because they've done it so much, like it, there's a certain kind of like cadence or thing that like it, and I think it's funny, like if you do it enough, it just kind of sticks.
Mm.
And I think like, and it's the absolute worst, like for an actor, it'd be like the absolute worst thing. But for a radio person who's just doing it, it's just interesting to like, parsing out the different aspects of, that on air broadcasting kind of
Mm-hmm.
performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
What's
sorry, Billy,
on?
what were you going to ask?
No, I was gonna say, well, just that I had the opposite issue. Like I came from on, theater and then into on-camera commercial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I got to voiceover that now I'm like, oh, I'm having the same problem in voiceover that I was having with commercial, where the casting director was like,
Huh.
we stop trying to be perfect. We just want to
Mm.
see you. Like, we
Hmm.
want to see you. And even if you mess up the words, like, obviously the day of, you wouldn't mess up the words, but like in this audition, we really just want to see who you are. And like, I'm like, oh, but then how? Like trying to, like,
Yeah.
it's like I can't do two things at once, like, trying to remember the words, trying to be myself, trying to, also
Right.
interact with this fake child that I'm, fake
Right. Right.
props, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
interact with a fake child. It's just, it is so, auditioning for commercials is hard.
Yeah.
It can be really hard. And
Totally.
yeah.
How did you get over? Like, how do you feel like
I
it?
don't think I ever
Like,
did
what did
because
it
I
take
just
you?
left. I left on camera to do voiceover. Well, I left Minneapolis and I don't have an on
Hmm.
camera agent here. I never got one because pandemic happened and then I just gave it up. But I
Oh.
never did. I just have, slowly gotten better at it in voiceover. And I'm like, maybe someday if I
Yeah.
go back to commercial stuff, maybe I'll magically be better because I'll have integrated
Yes.
that.
I think so. I think so. I think you should definitely try for it.
Never too late, Billy.
Yeah.
It
You look
feels
great on camera, and I could totally see how you'd be great, especially in commercial. I mean, for TV and film too, but you definitely can have like that. I know it sounds weird, but a commercial look,
I don't know. It's such a weird thing. You have to have the right haircut because your hair can't be too long because they
Mm,
want, you know what I mean? Like
hmm.
there were always so many rules for it
Yeah. I
that
do think that it's changing though.
mhm,
And I think it's a good thing. I mean, it just from my example too with the curly hair. I mean,
mm,
I used to put a relaxer in my hair. I mean, especially for hosting stuff, it would be so frustrating because for green screen,
mm,
I mean, people would get frustrated at my curls because it just would cause so many issues for green screen.
Yeah,
And
lighting, because it's kind of
mm,
the refracting in different directions.
Did you
and then
ever?
there's like little bits here that would like come up as green instead of
Mm.
Oh
get
no.
the
Yeah.
um
Did you ever
and
consider a wig?
so I don't think so. Not until a little bit later.
Mm,
It it got before I even went to the wig. I It got to the point where it just was so frustrating that I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. If they
mm-hmm.
don't want my curls, that's fine. I'll just not do hosting. And if they want them, great. This is what they are. And if not, okay. Because it just was such a hassle. And I spent so much money on it.
Yeah.
And if I did do straight hair, I had the little like extensions that I could make sure that it was nice and full and all this stuff. And I'm like, what am I doing? I have naturally curly hair. I am not going to keep doing this.
And there's people who pay
Um,
a lot of money to get those curls.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, your hair is wonderful, so I love curls, and
Aw,
it's sad that it leads to such homogenization, of like
yeah.
what is out there.
But I think that these days, I think things have changed a lot. Like, I don't think there's been a lot more times where people have booked me and they've been like, I booked you because I just love your curls. And that never would have happened years ago. Like, never would have happened. Especially if a man, I know this sounds, sorry, Brandon, but if a man was choosing, like, if they wanted my hair straight or curly, 100% it would be straight for guys.
That's
For
weird. I've always dug chicks
females,
with curly hair. Like the bigger, curlier, the better.
it's
Hmm.
crazy. But then if a girl was making the choice or if a girl was involved in the decision, it was always, she was like, I said, make sure we keep her curly hair. Um,
That's
so it's just so weird. But I don't know if you've even looked at some of the commercials these days, but there's a lot more commercials that are just showing real people, and it's not the typical before it was almost like, I know this sounds weird, but it's like, it almost needs to be clean and polished kind of look,
Yeah.
And these days it's like, no, we want real people. We want curly hair. We want natural hair. We want, different things to reflect more of who people are, really.
Yeah.
So,
The Etsy commercials for the holiday were all very like normal people.
mhm.
And the Peloton commercials that have been
Yeah.
running recently, like there's that older woman with the blunt bangs and she's like got the bob and you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? She's like
Yes.
probably late
Yes.
60s.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
very real person.
Yes, totally. And I love that. I think that's
Hmm.
great. I even, Mike and I actually just booked a print job together that we just did, which we don't usually book things together, especially he rarely does print. I'll do print every once in a while, but um, it was so funny because I asked the people that were booking us, I was like, is this because of AI? Because you really just want somebody that looks like
Mm.
real instead of like models for your for your print stuff? Because I was like, this is crazy. We normally don't get booked for print. But I do think that there's gonna be more of a desire for like just like there is in voiceover, we want the imperfections. We don't want to hear that polished sound. And I think that there's going to be a lot more desire on camera for like, hey, we want a little something that's imperfect to show that this is human. This wasn't computer
That's
generated.
right.
It
Fight the
was real.
machines.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, do you have any advice for people who are, kind of going through these type of transitions or trying to find their place in
Yeah.
the creative world?
I mean, I would really encourage you if you have the opportunity to take time. It doesn't have to be 3 months, but it could be a week. It could be a long weekend where you just get away and honestly just take that time. Like there's no purpose. You don't create anything. You don't do anything, but just to really reflect and take that time. I would really encourage you to do what I didn't do and I regret. And then I also want to say that, and this is something that we try and tell people through Atlanta Voiceover Studio, is just take the next step. What we do, especially if you leave like a corporate job and you're doing this, on your own, it's a lot. You're having to be your own accountant, and you have to learn all this stuff, and it's so overwhelming and so much. And there's been times where I cried at our accountant's table, over QuickBooks because I just couldn't figure it out. And it was that moment that I was like, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but all I know is that every year I'll try and get a little bit better. It's like James Clear says in Atomic Habits, just 1% better, 1% better. And so I would really encourage you to look at it that way with things that aren't creative, but you are necessary to keep a business running, is that you just think, okay, this year I'll just get a little bit better at this area, or this year I'll get a little bit better at this area. And I know a lot of people would say just hire people, but you don't always have the money to hire other people. And a lot of times you have to just do it yourself. And that's frustrating. But do it and then just go, okay, I'm just going to get a little bit better every year. And I promise you, you'll look back like I've looked back and gone, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I have actually done that in my business. I never could have done that a decade ago, but I'm so grateful that I just pushed through and learned a little bit at a time.
That's great advice. And I think like the only thing I would say slightly differently is like, because I agree with you, you don't always have the
Yeah.
money, but like I've also encountered people who are just so hesitant to spend any money. And I'm like, you need to know exactly when to spend it on the right
That's
thing.
true.
Because if it's something that's stopping you now from making money that you could
That's
then
very true.
use, it's like you have to know when to make those investments, right?
Yeah. I totally agree with you on that, Billy Joe. I'm so glad you amended that with that because it's so true. It's so true. And even time-wise, I mean, I don't do my own books now. I hire a bookkeeper and it's wonderful. It's worth every single penny. And it's one of those things that also I got, okay, how much time do I spend on this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I probably could just spend 1 hour a week, but instead I like put it off. So then it it's more time. And so then all of a sudden it's like over half of a day that I've spent on this when that could have been put towards, doing voiceovers or whatever. I'm spending my weekend doing this. And so, so it totally is worth it being able to
Yeah.
spend that on that.
It's something people don't think about, but a friend of mine said it a long time ago because she was in business school. So I think they kind of taught this to them of like, well, if you get this job that pays more, but it's further away and you're commuting, let's say 3 hours a day round trip, plus you need to buy yourself coffee to get yourself through the day because you're getting up too early and all these other things that add up, then all of a sudden everything you're paying for to deal with this thing is actually less money than you would have been making doing this other thing. So it's like, well, what is my time worth?
Yeah.
And that's not even a value judgment. It's just a literally, how much can I make in an hour if I'm doing the thing that makes me the most money?
Yeah.
And what can I afford to pay for that will get me more of that time?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Very true.
Yeah.
I love
It's
it.
been so nice having you finally.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know we had to reschedule a few times, but I'm glad you finally made it here. And Brandon?
Yeah, tell the people where they can find you online if they want to at you.
Okay, if you want to at me, you can at Heidi Rew. It's just Heidi, and then Rew is spelled like ew, with an R in front of it. So I'm that across all social media platforms. And then Atlanta Voiceover Studio, it's just at Atlanta Voiceover Studio across platforms outside of X, but we're not really on X very often anymore. And so, yeah, but I'm just, you can find me pretty much anywhere. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll pump out the we'll keep preaching the gospel of AVS.
Oh, thank you guys.
Again, like you're like the fairy godmother of Scratch Claw Push. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're doing awesome. It's sounding so good. So
thank you so much.
Yeah.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on social media at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. To learn more about the show, visit scratchclawpush.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2024 by Carcutta Media, LLC, all rights reserved.